They thought humanity had forgotten. They believed time had softened the edges of old anger, that humans would eventually forgive the wrongs done to them. The galaxy had always underestimated humans. That mistake would cost them dearly. Years ago, when the frontier colonies were young and vulnerable, a powerful alien force invaded without warning. They attacked settlements, burned cities, and destroyed lives as easily as if they were playing a game. Many humans were killed, and countless others were scattered, left to survive on broken worlds with no hope of justice. The aliens believed they could make it right later with words, promises, or peace talks. They thought humans were fragile, forgiving, and polite. They were wrong. Even in the quiet years that followed, humanity did not forget. Survivors told stories. Children grew up hearing about the fire that had destroyed their homes, the friends they had lost, and the helplessness that had once gripped them. These stories were not just tales of pain, they were lessons in endurance. Each account carried a warning. Never underestimate a species that has suffered and survived. Across the solar systems, humanity rebuilt itself quietly, patiently, without making a sound the galaxy could notice. On the surface, human planets seemed peaceful. Cities were being reconstructed, farms were thriving again, and the political leaders spoke of diplomacy, cooperation, and calm. But beneath the surface, there was a different kind of energy, one that no one outside could see. Humans trained, they experimented, they invented, and they prepared. They did not do this for conquest or revenge. They did it because they knew that someday the galaxy would see what they were truly capable of. The alien forces believed that humanity's silence meant acceptance. They believed that the years of quiet rebuilding were proof that humans had forgiven and forgotten. Reports reached the Concord's councils, describing humanity as passive, predictable, and compliant. There were whispers of how easy it would be to continue negotiations, how soon the humans would yield to reason. That arrogance became the first fatal mistake. In reality, humanity was never passive. The survivors of the attacks carried a fire in their hearts that could not be extinguished. They remembered every moment of fear, every life lost, every injustice that had gone unpunished. Across training grounds and research labs, the next generation of humans grew up with a clear understanding of the cost of weakness. They learned to move quickly, think strategically, and fight with precision. Every lesson, every struggle, every difficult night spent repairing what had been destroyed added to their strength. It was not only about weapons or technology. Humanity had learned to adapt. When an alien force assumed they understood humans, they did not realize that humans had evolved in thinking, in tactics, and in resilience. They had built networks of communication and intelligence that allowed them to act faster than anyone could predict. The humans did not just train to survive, they trained to respond in a way that would leave no question about their power. When the aliens finally returned, it was supposed to be a simple matter. A delegation arrived, claiming to offer dialogue, peace, and reconciliation. They believed they were walking into a welcoming world, one that would appreciate their willingness to talk. But the humans were not waiting with open arms. They had been watching, listening, and preparing for exactly this moment. Every system, every fleet, and every soldier had been ready for a long time. The first indication that humanity had changed came quietly. Outposts that were once isolated began sending encrypted signals across the stars. Humans who had once seemed ordinary were now commanders, engineers, and tacticians with unparalleled skill. Reports of new technologies, new strategies, and new weapons reached the corners of human space, though they were never meant for the aliens to see. It was a silent warning, a signal that humanity was no longer the species that could be easily pushed aside. Even before the aliens realized the danger, the survivors of the old attacks were already gathering. They had formed councils, not just to share memories, but to plan action. These were not meetings of anger or revenge. They were assemblies of clarity and focus. Every participant understood that the galaxy had underestimated humanity for too long. Every decision was guided by a single truth. Humans do not forgive the easily dismissed. And humans do not forget those who harm them. Among the survivors, there were no celebrities, no generals, and no politicians. These were ordinary humans who had endured the worst and survived. They were farmers, scientists, engineers, and laborers who had seen their worlds burn to ash and rebuilt them from nothing. Each of them carried the lessons of survival in their hands, their minds, and their hearts. They were the backbone of a humanity that had learned the importance of patience, preparation, and timing. As the alien delegation moved closer to human territory, they were unaware of the network of eyes watching them. Satellites, sensors, and ships that had remained hidden for decades suddenly became active. Humans monitored every movement, every signal, and every transmission. There was no panic, no haste, only precise calculation. Humanity's response would not be immediate. It would be deliberate, unavoidable, and unforgettable. Meanwhile, the younger generation of humans had grown with stories of survival and strength. They had never known the world before the attacks, yet they carried the weight of their ancestors' memories. Training was not just for military skill, it was for understanding strategy, for thinking ahead, and for making every action count. The galaxy assumed they were inexperienced, but in reality, they were more prepared than anyone had ever imagined. The aliens believed they could walk back into human space, speak empty words, and continue as though nothing had happened. They did not know that humanity's fire had never gone out. They did not know that the species they had tried to break had spent decades becoming stronger, smarter, and more precise. The stage was set for a reckoning that would be felt across the stars. On human worlds, the old survivors taught the young. They shared stories not to incite hatred, but to instill understanding. They taught that survival was not about weakness or fear. It was about strength, unity, and action. Every lesson was reinforced with practice, and every young human learned that words could be powerful, but when necessary, action spoke louder. Humanity's silence in the past had been misread as compliance, but it had only been preparation. And so, as the alien ships entered human space, the first part of the story came to an invisible climax. The galaxy could not yet see it, but humanity had already decided how they would respond. It would not be with words. It would not be with apologies or negotiations. It would be with fire and steel, precision and intelligence. They had waited, they had prepared, and they had remembered every wrong. Humanity was ready to speak for itself, and no one in the galaxy would ignore it again. The old survivors watched from their hidden stations, proud of what humanity had become. The next generation, unaware of the full history yet guided by its lessons, were ready to take their place in this story. Every decision, every preparation, every silent night spent rebuilding had led to this moment. Humans had become more than survivors. They had become a force that no one would dare underestimate. The galaxy, confident and arrogant, believed it had already won the conversation. They thought forgiveness would come easily. But humanity was about to show them a truth that had been growing quietly for decades. The story of pain had not ended with the attacks. It had transformed into a story of resilience, preparation, and unwavering strength. By the time the aliens realized what humanity had become, it would already be too late. Their misjudgment would be clear, their confidence shattered, and their expectations destroyed. Humans had waited, and now the fire that had been smoldering for years was ready to burn. And in that fire, the galaxy would learn the first lesson of many. You do not underestimate humans, and you do not assume forgiveness when it has not been offered. Even in the silence of human space, there was energy, anticipation, and power. Every human, from the youngest pilot in training to the oldest survivor of the frontier attacks, understood that they were part of something greater. The galaxy had made a mistake in underestimating them. That mistake would soon be clear to everyone. The story of humanity was no longer just a story of survival. It was becoming a story of awakening, a story of strength forged from suffering. And for those who had once believed that humans would simply forgive and forget, the first chapter of their reckoning was about to begin. Even after decades of rebuilding, humanity remained quiet. To the galaxy, it looked like a peaceful species, content to focus on its own worlds and lives. Aliens believed that humans had retreated because they were weak, fearful, or forgiving. They thought that humans would never take action. That time had healed old wounds, and that peace would be accepted without question. They could not have been more wrong. In reality, humanity was far from passive. The silence was not surrender. It was strategy. Across planets and colonies, humans had been quietly preparing. Each city, each station, each training ground became part of a larger plan. Young humans learned to pilot ships with precision, repair machines under pressure, and operate in ways that were unpredictable to outsiders. They were trained not just to survive, but to respond with focus and efficiency when the moment arrived. The older survivors, those who had lived through the first attacks, became teachers. They shared every lesson they had learned from the fires, the battles, and the losses. They spoke not only of pain, but also of hope, resilience, and the strength of unity. They taught the younger generation to work together, to trust one another, and to never underestimate the value of preparation. They emphasized that survival alone was not enough. Humans had to be ready to defend themselves, to reclaim what had been lost, and to show that they could not be ignored. Across the planets, technology grew quietly but steadily. Engineers and scientists worked in hidden laboratories, inventing machines and systems that the galaxy could not predict. Humans studied patterns, experimented with tactics, and tested weapons in ways that were invisible to outsiders. Every creation, every design, every new development was intended to ensure that when the time came, humanity could act decisively. This was not the work of a single government or a single army. It was the work of a species determined to never be vulnerable again. The aliens, confident in their assumptions, continued to believe that humanity would respond politely. They sent envoys to negotiate, assuming that the humans would want to avoid conflict. Messages arrived at human space stations asking for dialogue, promising friendship, and reminding humanity of the benefits of cooperation. The galaxy assumed humans would see reason and accept these gestures, but humans were no longer the species the galaxy had known. The envoys were met with silence. The messages were recorded, studied, and analyzed, but they were not answered in the way the aliens expected. The silence was deliberate. It was a statement in itself. Humans were listening, observing, and planning. They were waiting for the right moment, the moment when their voice could be heard clearly and powerfully, without ambiguity. Even ordinary citizens contributed. Farmers, laborers, teachers, and merchants all played a role in this quiet preparation. They built supplies, maintained equipment, and ensured that communities were strong and ready. Every human understood that they were part of something greater than themselves. This was not about revenge or hatred. It was about survival, dignity, and demonstrating the strength of a species that would not be forgotten. The alien delegation, meanwhile, continued toward human space, completely unaware of what was happening. They saw empty skies, calm cities, and active trade routes, all signs that humans were peaceful and compliant. They believed that their plans would succeed, that dialogue would be easy, and that the past would be forgiven. Confidence had blinded them to the reality that humanity was preparing in ways they could not detect. Within human space, secret fleets were being assembled. Ships that had been hidden in asteroids, behind moons, and in uncharted territories, were now moving into position. Crews were trained, drills were completed, and every system was tested. Humans were not preparing for negotiation. They were preparing to defend themselves and to show the galaxy that they could no longer be underestimated. The younger generation of humans, who had grown up hearing stories of past attacks, felt a sense of purpose unlike anything before. They were inspired not by anger, but by responsibility. They understood that their species' survival depended on unity, intelligence, and courage. Each human knew that the moment they had been trained for might come suddenly, and they were ready. The galaxy had assumed they were inexperienced, but they were among the most capable strategists and operators in existence. Humans also learned to adapt in unexpected ways. They studied alien tactics, anticipating the strategies that might be used against them. They simulated attacks, built defenses, and developed methods to counter threats. No assumption was left unchallenged, no risk ignored. The patience they had shown for decades was not weakness, it was wisdom. By preparing quietly, they ensured that when the moment came, they would have every advantage. As the alien delegation approached, humans observed them closely. Sensors, satellites, and hidden ships recorded every movement. Nothing was left to chance. Every decision the aliens made, every message they sent, every step they took was being studied. Humans understood their own history better than anyone. They knew how easily the galaxy could misread them, and they intended to make sure that any future interactions would be based on a clear understanding of human strength, intelligence, and resolve. The older generation, who had survived the first attacks, guided the younger humans in every step. They shared not only knowledge of strategy and tactics, but also lessons about resilience and courage. They emphasized that humans were not a species to be underestimated, and that any challenge would be met with unity and precision. They reminded the younger humans that patience was a weapon, and that the galaxy's assumptions could be used against it. Even as they prepared, humans maintained the appearance of normalcy. Cities thrived, trade continued, and society functioned peacefully on the surface. Outsiders saw only calm and routine. They assumed that humanity was passive, forgiving, and predictable. But beneath that calm, humans were ready. Every human, from the youngest cadet in training to the oldest survivor of the frontier attacks, understood their role in the larger plan. They were not preparing for conflict out of hatred. They were preparing for survival, for justice, and for the protection of their species. The alien delegation, confident and arrogant, continued to believe they could negotiate. They sent messages promising understanding, cooperation, and peace. They assumed that humans would respond politely, that they would accept words instead of actions. But humans did not respond as expected. The silence itself was a message, a warning that humanity was no longer a species to be underestimated. Humans had learned that words alone were not enough. Action, preparation, and unity were what would protect them and ensure their survival. They had waited for the right moment, preparing in silence, and now that moment was approaching. Every human knew that when the time came, they would not act impulsively, but with precision, intelligence, and strength. The galaxy believed that humans had forgotten. That time had healed old wounds, and that the species would accept reconciliation. They did not understand that humanity's silence had been decades of preparation. They did not see the hidden fleets, the trained crews, or the young humans ready to take their place in history. And they did not realize that the patience humanity had shown was not weakness, but a quiet promise that when the time came, humans would act with clarity and power. Even in the calm before the storm, humans were united. Farmers, engineers, teachers, and soldiers all understood their role. They knew that they were part of a species that had survived unimaginable hardship and emerged stronger. They knew that when the time came, the galaxy would see what it had underestimated for too long. The alien delegation, confident in their assumptions, sailed toward human space, unaware that their arrival would not be met with diplomacy or words. They assumed they were walking into a world ready to forgive. But humans were ready in ways the galaxy could not have predicted. The patience, preparation, and resilience of decades had reached their peak. The first signal of humanity's response was about to be sent, and it would change the way the galaxy saw them forever. Humans had spent decades learning, growing, and preparing. Every lesson, every hardship, every quiet night of planning had built a foundation stronger than the aliens could imagine. They had waited not out of fear, but out of wisdom. And now, as the alien ships approached, humanity was ready to demonstrate its strength, not with words, but with action, precision, and unity. The galaxy believed humanity had been passive. They believed humans would forgive easily. But humans had waited for this moment, growing stronger with every passing year. They had prepared silently, united across planets and generations, and now the stage was set for them to speak through their actions. The calm, quiet, and seemingly forgiving species was ready to remind the galaxy what it meant to be human and that patience. Preparation and resilience were as powerful as any weapon dot by the time the aliens realized that humanity had changed. It would already be too late. Humans were no longer the species to be underestimated. They were patient, united, intelligent, and ready. Every individual had a role to play. Every plan had been rehearsed, and every young human understood the legacy they carried. The galaxy would soon learn the truth. Humans do not forget. Humans do not forgive easily. And when the time comes, humans act with clarity, strength, and precision. The alien delegation had entered human space, moving slowly, confidently, believing that they were stepping into a world ready to forgive. They had no idea that the calm, polite species they remembered from decades ago had changed entirely. Humanity had spent years observing, learning, and preparing, and now the moment to act was very close. The galaxy would soon realize that humans did not forgive easily, and they certainly did not forget Dot in hidden command centers. Humans monitored every signal from the approaching alien ships. Eyes that had once watched helplessly as colonies burned now saw everything. Every movement, every message, every adjustment in the alien fleet was recorded and analyzed. Humans were not acting impulsively, they were calculating, waiting for the perfect moment. They had learned that precision, patience, and timing could accomplish more than anger or haste ever could. Young pilots, who had grown up hearing stories of the old attacks, were now at the controls of the newest human ships. They were calm, confident, and focused. Years of training had prepared them for this moment. Their instructors, survivors of the previous wars, watched silently, knowing that the galaxy would soon witness what humans could do when pushed to defend themselves. These young humans carried not only skill, but also a sense of purpose. Every maneuver, every calculation, every decision mattered. They were the living proof that survival had created strength, not fear. Across the human colonies, engineers, scientists, and strategists worked together seamlessly. Ships that had been hidden for decades now moved into position. Defenses that were once passive became active, ready to respond in a coordinated effort. Humans had learned to trust one another completely. Every individual understood that their work, no matter how small it seemed, contributed to a larger plan. Unity was their greatest weapon, and it had been forged through shared hardship, not orders or commands. The aliens, meanwhile, continued to believe they could negotiate. They sent messages requesting dialogue, offering promises of peace, and even suggesting trade agreements. They assumed humans would respond politely, that diplomacy would work, and that the old wounds had healed. But humanity had long moved beyond words. The messages were received, acknowledged, and stored, but they would not shape humanity's response. The time for words was over. Now, humans would speak with action. In hidden hangars, ships roared to life. Engines hummed, lights flashed, and systems that had remained dormant for decades awoke simultaneously. Every crew member knew their role. They had trained for years, rehearsing countless scenarios, and now the first step in humanity's plan was beginning. Silence had been their ally for decades, but action was their language now. The galaxy was about to hear it loud and clear. Even civilians contributed in small but important ways. Farmers and laborers ensured that supply lines were ready, that materials were delivered on time, and that communities were prepared to support the fleets. Scientists monitored communications and analyzed patterns, providing crucial information for the first moves. Every human, whether in space or on the ground, understood the stakes. This was not about revenge or hatred. It was about survival, dignity, and showing the galaxy that humans could not be underestimated. The alien delegation had reached the outer edge of human space. They moved with the confidence of superiority, unaware of the silent forces watching them from every angle. Satellites and hidden scouts provided live updates to command centers, creating a network of observation that the aliens could not detect. Every action taken by the aliens was anticipated, studied, and prepared for. Humanity had turned patience into a weapon, and now they were ready to use it. Inside the command centers, leaders gave the signal. It was not shouted or dramatic. It was quiet, deliberate, and precise. Ships moved from their hidden positions into formations that were invisible to the alien sensors. Pilots adjusted their controls with calm focus, knowing that any misstep could jeopardize the entire plan. Every decision had been rehearsed countless times, every action measured and considered. Humanity had waited for decades to make this moment perfect, and now nothing could stop them. As the human ships approached, the first warning was subtle but unmistakable. Sensors on the alien ships began picking up strange anomalies, signals they could not interpret, movements that seemed impossible. Panic began to ripple through the delegation, though it was carefully hidden from human observers. They had assumed control, assumed superiority, and now the situation was no longer under their command. Humans had waited silently, and now their presence could not be ignored. The first communication from humans was not a message of peace. It was a calculated display of readiness. Fleets moved into strategic positions, blocking escape routes and demonstrating the precision of human coordination. Every ship, every maneuver, every formation told a single story. Humanity remembers. Humanity has grown, and humanity is ready to act. The aliens had underestimated a species that had once been thought weak, and they were about to learn the cost of that mistake. Ground forces, too, had been mobilized. Hidden bases revealed their defenses, and planetary shields activated in synchrony with the movements of the fleets. Humans were no longer scattered and vulnerable. They were unified, organized, and in control of every aspect of their space. The coordination between fleets and planetary defenses was seamless, a testament to years of preparation and practice. Humans had turned patience and endurance into strategy, and it was working perfectly. As the alien delegation tried to respond, they realized that every move they made was anticipated. Every approach, every attempt to communicate, every adjustment in formation met with a human counteraction. The aliens had expected hesitation, fear, or compliance, but instead they were facing calm, calculated, and unstoppable coordination. Humanity had transformed the quiet years of preparation into a force the galaxy had never expected. Even as the first confrontations began, the focus was not on destruction for its own sake. Humans acted with precision, targeting key systems and neutralizing threats with minimal waste. Their goal was not to cause chaos, but to demonstrate capability. Every action sent a clear message to the galaxy. Humans do not forgive lightly, and they do not forget. The species that had once been underestimated had become a force that could not be ignored. Got the younger pilots, who had spent years training for this moment, now experienced the culmination of everything they had learned. Every maneuver, every calculation, every response to the unexpected tested their skill and composure. They were calm, confident, and united. The galaxy had expected fear or hesitation, but humans were responding with intelligence, strategy, and precision. The lessons of survival, resilience, and preparation had produced results far beyond what the aliens had imagined. Meanwhile, humans on the ground watched and coordinated with the fleets above. They monitored sensors, relayed information, and ensured that every operation ran smoothly. Civilians, engineers, and scientists all contributed to the unfolding plan. Humanity had transformed its quiet strength into action, and the result was a display of unity and capability that no alien species had anticipated. The alien delegation, now fully aware that they had misjudged humans, struggled to regain control. Their confidence, once unshakable, was now shaken. Every move they made was countered with precision, every plan anticipated, and every expectation of forgiveness shattered. Humans had waited for this moment, and their patience had created a force that could not be ignored. Even as the confrontation escalated, humans maintained focus. They did not act out of hatred, but out of clarity and purpose. Every action, every strategy, and every display of power was designed to show that humanity had changed. The species that had once been seen as weak, forgiving, and passive was now organized, united, and unstoppable. The galaxy would remember this moment for generations. By the time the aliens attempted to negotiate again, the situation had already shifted. Humans were in control, not through aggression alone, but through preparation, unity, and intelligence. Every fleet, every defense, every young human in training contributed to the display of capability that could not be ignored. The aliens had assumed humanity would forgive easily. They were about to learn how wrong that assumption had been. Humans had turned silence into a weapon, patience into strategy, and preparation into action. The first response had been deliberate, precise, and unmistakable. The galaxy was witnessing a species that had survived unimaginable hardship and emerged stronger, smarter, and more capable than anyone had expected. The quiet years of preparation were no longer invisible. They were now a force in motion, unstoppable and undeniable. Even as the alien delegation attempted to reassess the situation, they realized the cost of underestimating humanity. Every calculation they had made, every assumption they had relied on, had been wrong. The species they had dismissed as forgiving, passive, or weak was now demonstrating clarity, strength, and unity on a scale that could not be ignored. Humanity was no longer a species to be misjudged, and the galaxy would learn this lesson the hard way. The first moves had been made. The silent patience of decades had transformed into action. Humans were no longer waiting. They were speaking through their actions, demonstrating that forgiveness was not a given and that strength had been forged through survival. The galaxy had begun to notice the change in humanity. What had once seemed quiet, peaceful, and forgiving was now revealing itself as something far stronger, more organized, and far more capable than anyone had expected. The alien delegation, which had once moved confidently through human space, now faced a species that refused to be underestimated. Humans were no longer passive observers. They were active, precise, and fully prepared. Across human space, the fleets had aligned into their positions with remarkable efficiency. Ships that had once been hidden for decades now moved like clockwork, forming patterns and formations that the aliens could not predict. Every movement, every maneuver was carefully calculated. Human crews communicated seamlessly, even across vast distances, coordinating their actions with a level of precision that made the galaxy pause and take notice. On the planets below, Humans watched from observation posts and control centers. Engineers checked systems, strategists studied patterns, and scientists monitored signals. Every individual knew their role in the unfolding plan. The younger generation, trained for years, now witnessed the culmination of decades of preparation. They understood that they were part of a species that had survived unimaginable hardship and emerged stronger. They had been ready for this moment, and it had finally arrived. The alien delegation tried to maintain composure, but uncertainty had begun to creep into their ranks. They could feel the change in human behavior, even if they could not yet fully understand it. Every attempt at communication was met with silence or a calculated response, showing that humans were no longer willing to negotiate on terms that ignored their strength. The confidence that had carried the delegation this far was fading, replaced with caution and concern. Humans did not act out of anger or hatred. Every move was precise and measured. The fleets advanced with purpose, targeting key areas that would demonstrate capability without causing unnecessary destruction. Humans wanted the galaxy to understand that their strength was real, organized, and deliberate. Every strike, every maneuver, every action was a message. Humanity remembers, humanity endures, and humanity cannot be ignored. The alien delegation began to realize that their assumptions about humanity were entirely wrong. They had assumed that decades of silence meant forgiveness. They had assumed that humans were passive, weak, and easily persuaded. Now, they were witnessing a species that had spent years preparing, learning, and growing stronger. The galaxy had underestimated humanity, and that mistake was becoming painfully clear. On one of the outer human colonies, a young pilot adjusted her controls as her ship moved into formation. She had grown up hearing stories of the attacks that had destroyed her homeworld when she was too young to remember the fear firsthand. Her training had prepared her for this moment, but the weight of history was never far from her mind. Every maneuver, every decision, every action she took was guided by the lessons of her elders and the sacrifices of the survivors. She understood that she was not just defending her planet, she was demonstrating the strength of an entire species. Meanwhile, engineers and technicians worked tirelessly to ensure that every system operated perfectly. Communication networks, navigation systems, and defense protocols all ran smoothly. The coordination between fleets and planets below was flawless. Humans had turned patience into power, preparation into strength, and unity into a weapon that no alien species had anticipated. As human fleets moved into key positions, the aliens began to panic. They had assumed compliance, but they were now facing calculated resistance at every turn. Every move they made was anticipated, every adjustment countered with precision. The delegation realized that their years of confidence and arrogance had blinded them to the reality of human capability. The species they had dismissed as forgiving and passive was now demonstrating control over its entire space, a control that was both deliberate and undeniable. Even as the tension grew, humans maintained focus. Every pilot, engineer, and strategist acted with clarity and discipline. There was no panic, no hesitation, only precise action and coordination. Humans had learned the value of patience and preparation, and now they were applying it on a scale that the galaxy could not ignore. Their silence had been deliberate, and their response was equally deliberate. The alien delegation attempted to regroup, but their confidence continued to erode. They realized that they could no longer control the situation. The humans had anticipated their every move, prepared for every eventuality, and coordinated their response in a way that left the delegation uncertain and fearful. The galaxy had assumed that humanity was forgiving, but now it was clear that humans had been waiting for the right moment to act, and that moment had arrived. On the ground, civilians watched as fleets maneuvered above them. They were calm, not out of fear, but out of understanding. They had been trained for this moment, had prepared for decades and knew that every action taken by the fleets was part of a larger plan. Humans had learned that survival depended on unity, intelligence, and timing. Every individual, from the youngest cadet to the oldest survivor, understood their role in the unfolding events. As the human fleets approached key positions, they began to demonstrate their technological advancements. New systems, hidden for decades, revealed capabilities that the aliens could not have imagined. Advanced navigation systems, precision targeting, and coordinated defenses all showcased the depth of human preparation. The galaxy had underestimated humanity, and now the full extent of that underestimation was being revealed. The aliens attempted to respond with force, but their attacks were met with countermeasures that neutralized every effort. Humans had anticipated these moves, prepared strategies to counter them, and executed them flawlessly. Every strike, every maneuver, every adjustment demonstrated the intelligence, skill, and unity of humanity. The species that had once been dismissed as forgiving and passive was now a force that demanded recognition. Even as the battle unfolded, humans maintained their composure. They did not act out of revenge, but out of clarity and purpose. Every move was deliberate, every decision measured. The galaxy had assumed that humans would react emotionally or impulsively, but they were witnessing something entirely different. A species that had transformed patience and preparation into power. Young pilots, engineers, and strategists were inspired by the precision and coordination of their species. They understood that every action, every maneuver, and every decision was part of a larger plan. Humans had learned that survival depended not just on strength, but on intelligence, unity, and timing. Every individual, from the youngest recruit to the oldest veteran, contributed to the demonstration of capability that was now unfolding. The alien delegation, once confident, was now in retreat. They had assumed that humanity would forgive easily. That time had healed old wounds, and that the species would accept their promises of peace. Now, they were confronted with the reality of human capability, precision, and unity. The galaxy had underestimated humanity, and the consequences were becoming painfully clear. Even as humans demonstrated their strength, they maintained discipline and focus. Every move was calculated, every action deliberate, every strategy executed with precision. The galaxy was witnessing a species that had survived unimaginable hardship, learned from it, and transformed patience, preparation, and resilience into action. Humans were no longer passive, forgiving, or easily dismissed. They were a force that could not be ignored. The first waves of coordinated strikes demonstrated not only capability, but intelligence. Human fleets neutralized key systems without unnecessary destruction, showcasing strategic skill and precision. Every move was a message to the galaxy. Humanity remembers, humanity endures, and humanity cannot be underestimated. The alien delegation, overwhelmed by the scale and coordination of the response, began to understand the cost of their assumptions. Even civilians contributed to the operation, maintaining supply lines, repairing equipment, and monitoring communications. Every human understood that they were part of a larger whole, that their actions mattered, and that unity was their greatest strength. The galaxy had assumed that humans were forgiving and passive, but now it was clear that decades of preparation had created a species capable of precise, coordinated, and deliberate action. As the confrontation escalated, humans continued to demonstrate control. Every attack, every defense, and every maneuver was executed with clarity and purpose. The galaxy was witnessing a species that had transformed patience into power, preparation into strategy, and unity into action. Humans had waited for decades, and now the moment to demonstrate their capability had arrived. The alien delegation, facing the reality of human strength, was forced to retreat. Every plan they had relied upon, every assumption they had made, had been invalidated. Humans had demonstrated that they were no longer a species to be underestimated. The galaxy had assumed that time had softened humanity, that forgiveness was easy, and that compliance was inevitable. Now they understood the truth. Humans do not forget. Humans do not forgive easily, and humans act with precision and strength when the moment is right. The fleets, now in complete control, continued to demonstrate their unity and capability. Every human, from pilots to engineers to civilians, contributed T. The galaxy had begun to understand something it had long ignored. Humans were not to be underestimated. The alien delegation, which had once moved with confidence, now faced a species that had prepared for decades, a species that had grown stronger and smarter through every hardship it had endured. Humanity was no longer simply defending itself, it was demonstrating its full capability. And the message was clear. Mistakes against humans came with consequences. Every human fleet, every planetary defense, every trained individual was now acting with purpose. The earlier moves had been warnings, precise and controlled, but now the response escalated. Humans were no longer content with showing capability. They were asserting dominance in a way that left no doubt in the galaxy's mind. Every maneuver was deliberate, every action measured, and every move communicated strength without hesitation. On the surface of human colonies, civilians watched as fleets moved across the skies. There was no panic, only understanding. These people had grown up with stories of survival, tales of destruction, and lessons in patience. They knew that the actions of the fleets were the culmination of decades of preparation, training, and silent observation. Every individual, from technicians maintaining equipment to strategists analyzing enemy movements, played a vital role. Humanity's strength was not only in its ships or weapons, but in its unity and shared purpose. The alien delegation struggled to adapt. They had expected compliance, forgiveness, and hesitation. They had assumed that humans would act emotionally, impulsively, or without coordination. Now, every assumption they had relied on was proving false. Humans acted with intelligence, precision, and foresight. Every move by the aliens was met with a counter that was already anticipated. The galaxy began to realize that humans had turned patience into a weapon, strategy into action, and preparation into an unstoppable force. Young pilots, who had grown up in training simulations and drills, were now at the heart of the operations. Every decision they made was guided by lessons passed down from survivors of past attacks. They understood that their actions were not just about winning a fight. They were about proving the resilience, intelligence, and unity of humanity. Every maneuver in the skies above, every calculated strike, was a demonstration of what humans could achieve when fully prepared. Engineers and scientists continued their work behind the scenes. They ensured that every system ran flawlessly, that communication networks remained uninterrupted, and that supplies and reinforcements moved efficiently. Humans had learned long ago that no victory relied solely on firepower. Strategy, preparation, and the seamless coordination of every element, every person, every ship, every planet were what created unstoppable strength. The galaxy watched, gradually realizing that humans had mastered these skills to perfection. The alien delegation attempted to regroup, but their efforts were in vain. Every attempt to organize their forces, to regain control, or to negotiate was anticipated and countered. Humans had created a network of observation and response so precise that it was almost impossible to find a weakness. Every action taken by the aliens only confirmed one truth. Humans had evolved into a species capable of extraordinary coordination, intelligence, and resilience. Even civilians on human worlds played their part. Farmers, laborers, and ordinary citizens ensured that resources were available for fleets and defenses. They maintained infrastructure, repaired equipment, and supported communication networks. Every human understood their role in the larger plan. Survival, unity, and preparation had become ingrained in the human identity. Every individual, no matter how small their role seemed, contributed to the demonstration of strength that was now visible across the galaxy dot as the confrontation intensified. Humans began to demonstrate new technologies that had remained hidden for decades. Ships revealed capabilities that the aliens could not have predicted: advanced navigation systems, defensive measures, and coordinated attack strategies that neutralized every attempt at resistance. Humans had spent decades preparing for this moment, studying alien tactics and designing responses that would ensure success. Every move was calculated, deliberate, and devastatingly effective. The alien delegation, now fully aware of the strength and coordination of humans, struggled to adapt. Their confidence was gone, replaced by caution and fear. They realized that every plan they had relied upon was failing. Humans were not only reacting, they were controlling the battlefield. Every fleet, every planetary defense, every human participant was executing a perfectly coordinated strategy that left the aliens vulnerable and uncertain. Even as battles unfolded, humans maintained composure. There was no chaos, no panic, no wasted effort. Every strike, every maneuver, every defense was precise and calculated. Humans had learned the value of patience, preparation, and unity, and now they were applying those lessons on a scale the galaxy had never seen. The species that had once been underestimated was now demonstrating full mastery of strategy, coordination, and capability. Young pilots, engineers, and strategists worked seamlessly together. Every maneuver in the skies above and every defensive action on the planets below contributed to a single purpose, demonstrating that humanity could not be ignored, underestimated, or defeated easily. Humans had turned the quiet years of preparation into a force that could challenge even the most advanced alien fleets. The alien delegation tried to negotiate again, but the humans would not allow it. They understood that words alone were not enough. Decades of preparation, training, and coordination had taught humans that action spoke louder than any promise or apology. Every movement, every calculated strike, and every strategic deployment communicated a single message: humanity remembers, humanity endures, and humanity will act decisively when necessary. Even the most confident members of the alien delegation were now forced to acknowledge the reality they had ignored for so long. Humans were no longer passive. Humans were no longer forgiving. Humans had learned from past attacks and transformed that knowledge into power. The galaxy was witnessing the culmination of years of preparation, resilience, and strategic thinking. Every human, whether in a cockpit, at a control station, or maintaining supply lines, was contributing to a demonstration of unmatched capability. The fleets and planetary defenses continued to move with flawless coordination. Every maneuver neutralized potential threats. Every strike demonstrated precision, and every deployment reinforced humanity's strength. The aliens had assumed that humans would act emotionally or without strategy, but the reality was completely different. Humans had become masters of preparation, coordination, and execution. Every individual played a role, and the collective effort created a force that the galaxy could no longer ignore. Even as the confrontation reached its peak, humans maintained discipline. There was no chaos, no recklessness, no unnecessary destruction. Every action had a purpose, every move a message. The galaxy was witnessing a species that had turned patience into a weapon, preparation into strategy, and unity into unstoppable strength. Humans were no longer the species to be underestimated. They were a force that demanded respect and recognition. The alien delegation attempted to flee, but humans anticipated every move. Fleets blocked escape routes, defense systems remained active, and strategic deployments ensured that the aliens had no advantage. Every maneuver executed by humans demonstrated intelligence, precision, and control. The species that had once been thought forgiving and passive was now asserting itself fully. and the galaxy was forced to take notice. On the planets, civilians and military personnel alike observed the unfolding events with a mixture of pride and determination. Every person understood the significance of their actions. Humans had survived unimaginable hardships, prepared for decades, and were now demonstrating the full extent of their strength. Unity, intelligence, and preparation had turned a species once underestimated into a force that no alien could challenge lightly. As the confrontation drew to a critical point, humans revealed the final elements of their strategy. Hidden fleets emerged from secret locations, defensive systems activated with flawless timing, and coordinated strikes targeted the remaining threats with precision. Every action reinforced the message that humans were not only capable, but unstoppable when fully prepared. The galaxy had assumed that humanity would forgive and forget, but that assumption had been shattered completely. By the end of the day, the alien delegation had no choice but to acknowledge the power of humans. Every plan, every assumption, and every expectation had been defeated by preparation, coordination, and unity. The galaxy had underestimated humanity for decades, but now the reality was clear. Humans do not forgive easily. Humans do not forget. And humans act decisively when the time is right. Even after the immediate confrontation, humans continued to demonstrate their strength and readiness. Fleets remained in strategic positions, systems were monitored, and coordination continued across planets and colonies. The galaxy had learned an important lesson. Patience, preparation, and unity could create power that no species could ignore. Humans had waited for decades, and now they had proven themselves in ways that could never be undone. Every human, from the youngest pilot to the oldest survivor, had played a role in this display of strength. Every actio. The confrontation was over, but the galaxy had been forever changed. Aliens who had once considered humans forgiving and weak now understood the truth. Humanity was patient, resilient, and far more powerful than anyone had imagined. The lesson was clear, and it was one that would echo across planets and star systems for generations. Humans had acted with precision, unity, and intelligence, proving that they were a force not to be underestimated. Across human space, celebrations were quiet but profound. There were no extravagant displays, no reckless triumphs. People smiled, not out of arrogance, but out of understanding and pride. They had survived, prepared, and acted decisively. Every individual, from the youngest pilot to the oldest survivor, understood the significance of what had been accomplished. Humanity had not only defended itself, it had reshaped the galaxy's perception of what it meant to be human. The alien delegation, now retreating from human space, had been forced to rethink everything. They had assumed compliance, forgiveness, and hesitation, but they had encountered the opposite. Humans had prepared for decades, studied their tactics, and acted with a precision that left no room for error. The delegation would carry the memory of this encounter across the galaxy, a reminder that humans were no longer a species to be underestimated or dismissed. On the planets and colonies, life slowly began to return to normal. Trade routes reopened, cities resumed their rhythms, and families came together after the tension of the confrontation. But nothing was exactly as it had been. The galaxy had changed, and humanity had changed too. People had learned that patience and preparation could create strength far greater than brute force alone. They had learned that unity and discipline could shape the destiny of an entire species. The younger generation, who had trained for years and now witnessed the full results of their efforts, felt a sense of responsibility unlike anything before. They had not only participated in history, they had made it. Every pilot, engineer, scientist, and strategist understood that humanity's future depended on maintaining the discipline, unity, and intelligence that had carried them through this moment. They had learned that strength came from preparation and purpose, not just power. Even ordinary civilians had contributed in meaningful ways. Farmers, laborers, and teachers understood that their roles had supported the larger effort. Every individual, no matter their job or position, had played a part in demonstrating the capability of humanity. It was a reminder that survival and strength were not the work of a few. They were the result of a species working together, united by common purpose and determination. The alien fleets, once confident and arrogant, now carried the lesson of human resilience wherever they went. Their arrogance had been met with patience, preparation, and precision. Every strategy they had assumed would succeed had failed. Every expectation of compliance had been shattered. Humans had spoken through action, and the message was undeniable. Do not underestimate humanity. The galaxy would remember this moment as the day humans proved their true strength. In the weeks following the confrontation, humans focused on rebuilding and strengthening their networks. They did not act out of anger or vengeance. They acted to ensure that the mistakes of the past would never be repeated. Fleet formations, planetary defenses, and communication networks were all enhanced. Lessons learned from the confrontation applied to make the species stronger. Humans had proven themselves, but they also understood the importance of continued preparation. Communication with alien species began, but this time it was on humanity's terms. Humans had shown their capability, and now negotiations were based on respect, caution, and understanding. No longer assumed to be passive or forgiving, humanity demanded that their place in the galaxy be acknowledged. They were no longer a species that could be ignored or underestimated. Every interaction now carried the weight of decades of preparation and the decisive actions of the recent confrontation. Even as the galaxy adjusted to this new reality, humans focused on unity. Lessons from the confrontation emphasized the importance of working together, sharing knowledge, and maintaining readiness. Young people trained rigorously, learning not only skills but also strategy, resilience, and the responsibility of being part of a capable species. Every generation was now aware that humanity's survival depended on intelligence, preparation, and cooperation. Technology, too, advanced rapidly in the wake of the confrontation. Humans had revealed only a portion of their capabilities during the conflict. Scientists and engineers continued their work, ensuring that the species would remain capable of defending itself and demonstrating strength if necessary. Every advancement, every innovation, was built not for pride, but for survival and security. Humans had learned that preparedness was as important as power. Even as they strengthened their fleets and technology, humans maintained a sense of balance. They did not seek unnecessary conflict, nor did they pursue domination. The lesson of the confrontation was clear. Strength and preparation demanded respect, and humans would use their capability responsibly. Every action was guided by intelligence, discipline, and foresight. Humanity had proven its power, but it also understood the responsibility that came with it. The alien species, once overconfident and dismissive, began to approach interactions with caution. Stories of the confrontation spread across the galaxy, emphasizing the unity, intelligence, and preparation of humans. Species that had previously considered humans weak now treated them with respect, aware that any underestimation could lead to disastrous consequences. Humans had redefined their place in the galaxy, ensuring that their voice could never again be ignored. Across human space, people reflected on what had been achieved. The confrontation had shown that humanity's strength was not only in technology or fleets, but in unity, preparation, and the willingness to act decisively. Every citizen, young or old, understood that the species' survival had depended on working together, learning from the past, and planning for the future. Humanity had transformed from a species underestimated to a species that commanded respect. Young pilots and leaders who had participated in the confrontation were now seen as examples of what humans could achieve. Their calm, focused, and intelligent actions had demonstrated that the species was capable of extraordinary feats. They inspired others to learn, train, and prepare. Every generation now carried the lesson that patience, discipline, and unity were as important as courage or skill. Civilians, too, carried the knowledge that every role mattered. Farmers, engineers, teachers, and laborers all understood that their contributions supported the greater strength of humanity. No individual was insignificant, and every action had the potential to influence the outcome of a larger plan. The confrontation had proven that humanity's strength lay not just in fleets or weapons, but in the unity and coordination of an entire species. The alien species had learned a lesson they would never forget. They had assumed humans were forgiving, passive, and easily intimidated, but they had encountered the opposite. Humans had shown that preparation, patience, and resilience were as powerful as any weapon. The galaxy would remember the confrontation as the moment humans revealed their true capability. Misjudging humanity would no longer be an option. Even as humans moved forward, they remained vigilant. Lessons from the confrontation were applied to ensure that the species would always be prepared. Fleets were strengthened, defenses maintained, and training continued. Humans understood that power and capability carried responsibility, and they acted with foresight to protect the future of their species. Every generation learned that survival depended not only on courage and skill, but on intelligence. Preparation and unity. The galaxy, once dismissive of humanity, now regarded the species with respect and caution. Humans had demonstrated that they were capable of decisive action, precise strategy, and coordinated effort. The alien delegation that had once assumed compliance now carried the memory of defeat and a new understanding of what it meant to encounter humans. Humanity's patience had been long, but when the moment arrived, it had been more than sufficient to show the galaxy the strength of a prepared species. As life returned to normal across human colonies, people reflected on the lessons learned. The confrontation had not only defended human space, it had transformed the species' place in the galaxy. Every action, every individual contribution, and every coordinated effort had demonstrated the unity, intelligence, and capability of humanity. The galaxy would never again underestimate the species that had spoken through action rather than words. Even after the confrontation, humanity continued to advance. Technology, strategy, and coordination grew stronger with each passing year. Training programs ensured that future generations understood the importance of unity, preparation, and intelligence. Humans had proven their capability, but they also understood that maintaining strength and readiness was an ongoing responsibility. The confrontation had been decisive, but it was also a lesson. Survival required continuous effort, planning, and cooperation. Stories of the confrontation became part of human history, shared across generations. Young people learned of the fleets, the strategies, and the coordination that had defended human space. They learned that unity and preparation were as vital as courage, and